Has everybody been admitted?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, welcome everybody to our meeting tonight. This is a reminder to please sign the attendance sheet. It should be linked in the chat. And I'm going to ask the interpreters to give some instructions.
Hi, good evening. The following message will be in Spanish. Buenas noches a todos. Luciano y yo, Marisela, estaremos ofreciendo servicios de interpretación en español. Por favor, marque a 347-966-4114 y ingrese el ID de conferencia 921-526-580 numeral. Si desea escuchar audio en español, pero desea permanecer en esta sala de conferencia con Zoom, para poder ver la audiencia en su computadora, seleccione su computadora y el volumen y marque de su teléfono a la línea de conferencia en español. Nuevamente, la línea de conferencia en español es 347-966-4114 y ingrese el ID de conferencia 921-526-580 numeral. Por favor, no se olvide de llenar la hoja de asistencia en el enlace que aparece en el chat. Bienvenidos a nuestra reunión. Por favor, recuerde firmar la hoja de asistencia. Gracias. Thank you.
Do we just have Spanish translation tonight?
And
Yes.
ASL.
And we have ASL translation as well.
All right, is that it, Antonia, or?
I'm going to read the teleconferencing protocol. Due to the COVID-19 health crisis, tonight's forum is being conducted by teleconference. For your own privacy, we ask that you turn off your camera and please use audio only. Questions for tonight's forum were collected in advance via an online survey that was emailed to the public. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please drop it in the chat and we will do our best to have your questions answered. We will hear from as many speakers as the time allows. If you are calling in and have a question during the public comment period, please press *9 to comment. We will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. This protocol, I guess, okay. Sorry, Camille, I didn't see your note. I would like to now introduce CEC13 President Ayana Bahim and President Camille Casaretti of CEC15 to welcome our guests.
Thanks so much, Antonia. And thank you all for being here. On behalf of CEC13, we appreciate CEC15 and Assembly Member JoAnne Simon for their partnership in this work. We have tried to have an annual meeting focused around special ed together for the past few years. And this year, we thought it was especially important in these times, given the COVID pandemic, the social unrest, the inequity that we're seeing in our schools and in our communities, that we bring in some additional voices and additional resources for the community. In the paper today, it was reported that 1 in 4 students in New York are not getting their mandated IEPs met. And we know that in our communities, especially in District 13, we've lost teachers to COVID. There have been some suicides by parents and a child. And there have been other tragedies in our community that are so hard for us to deal with that we, again, when JoAnne, the Assembly Member, and Camille at CEC15 and I were speaking, along with the other members of our councils and staff, we just thought we have to do something. And we have to make sure that this meeting, this annual meeting, is a real resource to our community, and that we talk about special ed We talk about how parents should be able to get services to their children, and that we should also talk about wellness and mental health and how we can get those resources to each other. So in the spirit of that, those central themes, that's why we've come together tonight. And I'm just, again, so grateful to CEC13 and Assembly Member Simon for their partnership in this work with us in District 13. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Camille.
Brianna, thank you so much. Thank you for really elevating the inequities that have been caused by the pandemic and prior to the pandemic, of course. I want to thank our guests for coming tonight. I see a lot of people here on the call. We have an amazing group of speakers tonight. And I also see we have a lot of DOE representatives. So thank you, Superintendent Scott and Robert Kopack from Brooklyn North. This list is so long, it's hard to see who's here. So if I'm forgetting anybody, thank you again for being here tonight. I'm really excited about what we're going to be learning. And I want to remind everybody on the call, if you don't already know, that we have another meeting scheduled on Thursday, February 25th, right after the break at lunchtime, 12 o'clock to 1:15. And that is for a health and wellness family chat. We're going to review resources for social, emotional, and mental health supports, as well as offer families an opportunity to create a personal self-care list of effective techniques that help you. I do hope many of you will be able to join us for this opportunity for supporting your family or your school community members. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to Assembly Member JoAnne Simon for opening remarks. Welcome.
Oh, you're still muted. There you go.
Well, listen, I'm learning, but that's always a challenge, right? So thank you all very much. Thank you so much to Ayana Benin and to Camille Casaretti, who are the superstar CEC presidents here, and for all of the hard work that you do day in and day out to improve the education of the school children in districts 13 and 15. I also want to thank your respective leadership teams and all the members of the CECs, because I know that this, it takes a village, as they say, and I know you all work very hard. We're gathered tonight at this town hall to discuss issues that are concerning special education and mental health, as we've already mentioned. And as you know, COVID-19 has shifted the world on its axis. There's literally no part of our lives that has been untouched by COVID. And by now, we all know just how broadly COVID's impacts have exposed the deep and long-standing inequities in our society. Black and brown communities have borne the brunt of the health and economic impacts. Women, too, have lost ground. Last fall, the New York Times ran a story with the headline, "Recession's Toll on Women Points to Lasting Setback." Lasting setback. In December, the U.S. economy lost 140,000 jobs, all of them held by women. And we know so many of the moms that are the parents of kids in District 13 and District 15 can speak to those issues themselves. And we're here to help them as well. So how we address these inequities and recover equitably and inclusively will be our challenge for years to come. By talking about these issues now, we can begin the conversations needed to lay the foundation for recovery. We have known about, but have not necessarily had the tools or the boldness to address systemic racism in all the structures and institutions in our lives, including our schools. The 1619 Project by a New York Times reporter, Nicole Hannah-Jones, a District 13 parent, has brought that home to so many of us. Similarly, we have failed to recognize and address the systemic gender bias and misogyny in our society, and its even greater barriers to women and girls of color. And then, of course, there is the systemic barriers against people with disabilities that have too often been historically underrepresented as well. And then we have the science of COVID, about which we are learning every day, and its impacts. We don't yet know the long-term effects of having had COVID on our bodies, on our brains, and on the bodies and brains of our children. We're beginning to know the impacts of mental health of our children and on us. A strong influencer of mental health has been the isolation compelled by COVID, the challenges to our schools to deal with this silent and unseen enemy, the inadequacy of our responses, despite everybody's good faith best efforts. We have all made mistakes, and we all know that we need to improve our schools' abilities to deal with the crisis brought on by COVID and our unpreparedness for it. Our children are the most vulnerable to this, have been our kids with disabilities, and we're going to be talking about that tonight. Recent data shows that, as was alluded to, District 13 in November, 49% of students were not receiving their IEP services. By January, that number had improved to 30%, but that's still way too many students not getting their services. In District 15 in November, 49% were not receiving their IEP services. But by January, that number had improved to 20%. Still not good enough, of course. Neither is something to write home about. The costs have been enormous, and we have learned that we will be getting significant funds from the COVID relief bill in Washington, but that's going to fill a hole left by COVID. It's not the holes that were already there. We need more, and those of us in the State Assembly are working hard on that, including ways of raising revenue that we can start providing the kinds of support for our schools that we haven't been providing for too many years. So how to address these issues and more is what are the topic of our town hall this evening. And I'm really excited to get down to business, to hear from our panelists and to hear the questions from our parents. Thanks so much.
Away. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I lost the screen entirely. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Camille.
Sorry, I'm having a lot of internet problems here, the snow, etc. Thank you so much, Assembly Member Simon, for your opening remarks, and thank you for participating in our panel discussion this evening. AS Simon has always been a strong advocate for our children, and we are so grateful to have you here with us this evening. I'd like to introduce our other panelists and the moderators for this evening. We have quite a few expert speakers with us tonight. Ms. RueZalia Watkins, an education services specialist at Vibrant Emotional Health. Dr. Charissa Andreotti, a licensed clinical psychologist at Brooklyn MindSpring. Dr. Tara Gore, an adolescent psychologist at the Brooklyn Learning Center, and of course, Assembly Member JoAnne Simon, who we just heard from. Our moderators for tonight are CEC13's IEP representative, Jessica Simmons, and CEC15 Secretary, Bess Abrams. Before we start asking questions, I'd like to give a bit of a background on our panelists and give each a few moments to introduce themselves. RueZalia Watkins is an education specialist at Vibrant Emotional Health, an organization that provides people with emotional support and care when, where, and how they need it. Vibrant funds innovative community programs for people at all stages of life and state-of-the-art crisis lines like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Their advocacy and education work strives for systematic change. This hands-on experience gives them a unique understanding of the issues people face every day. RueZalia has helped find solutions to increase access to instruction and services for students facing emotional, behavioral, attention, and mental health challenges. She is a former vice president of the United Parents Association, where she served as an advocate for parents of special needs students and has contributed to education policy throughout her work with New York State and New York City officials, work groups, and advisories. She's one of the founding creators of the Parent Empowerment Program and a current board member of Families on the Move of New York City. We're thrilled to have you here, RueZalia. Would you like to say hello and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you so very much. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. So to our Representative Simon and to both presidents, I thank you so much for your warm welcome. Unlike many people, my work involves our work involves working with families. What's most interesting about Vibrant is that we have been working with mental health issues for over 50 years. Vibrant is the home of the Mental Health Association of New York City. So when we rebranded to Vibrant, everybody said, what happened to MHA? Well, we are still here. Doing our work through our 5 family resource centers, our adolescent skills programs. And of course, as you mentioned, we do support the National Suicide Helpline, New York City Well, the state crisis lines, and many other crisis response programs. But my work is working with our staff from our Children and Family Services Division. And that means working with teams of people who are working on a daily basis with families that are facing so many different crises at one time. Families that were experiencing crises before COVID. Families who have layers and layers and layers of issues to address, and also our children and our youth. So I am really honored to be here tonight. I'm also honored to do what I do every day, which is finding education solutions for families of children that have these mental, emotional distinctions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. Another speaker that we have here with us is Dr. Charissa Andreotti. She's a licensed clinical psychologist who completed her Ph.D. at Vanderbilt University. Dr. Andreotti was trained in assessment and treatment of children and adults, including comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, assessments for autism spectrum disorder, cognitive behavior therapy, parent-child interaction therapy, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and mindfulness techniques. Prior to founding BK MindSpring, Dr. Andreotti managed the clinical research program for the Child Mind Institute's Healthy Brain Network, which aims to apply big data and open science approaches to the search for biomarkers in mental illness and learning disorders. To date, the Healthy Brain Network has provided thousands of no-cost mental health and neurological evaluations to children from diverse New York City communities. She has co-authored and authored more than 20 peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapters, and has presented her work at many national and international conferences. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Andreotti. Would you like to say something?
Absolutely. Well, I'm just, extremely excited to be here and to have the opportunity to meet with you all this evening. This is such a great opportunity. I know COVID's been extremely isolating, and to get to see, so many faces on the screen tonight is, a lot of fun. Most of my work prior to starting this community practice in Brooklyn has involved a lot of research, and my research focus is the intersection of stress and cognition. So when we're under stress, how our brains work. And if there hasn't ever been, a time to study that, it's now. We're all under incredible amounts of stress. People are experiencing trauma. And, all of the research that I've, spent my career doing is really coming to bear right now, and seeing how kids are able to perform in school and, socially in the community. So I'm really excited tonight to talk about, some evidence-based coping strategies that I've been recommending to families in my practice. But that being said, I would love, if you want to type questions into the chat, to be able to address questions that people actually have here tonight. And, I think that would be a really good use of our time as well. So I'm happy to kind of go off script if there's some specific questions about coping and emotion regulation in times like these that I can be helpful with. And otherwise, I've just really enjoyed, since leaving the Child Mind Institute, getting to know so many great families here in Brooklyn, and getting to serve them as well, doing evaluations and also intervention support.
Thanks so much, Dr. Andreotti. And You know, I appreciate you being flexible and offering to answer questions directly in the chat. I think we're going to try to do a little bit of both because we ask people to submit questions and we want to honor that. But we also want to make sure that this is valuable and it is a resource for people. So we were also expecting one more panelist, Dr. Gore, and I don't see her right now. So if it's okay, I'm just going to skip her and talk about Assemblymember Simon. JoAnne Simon grew up in a working class neighborhood in Yonkers. She was the oldest girl in a family of 5 and learned early the value of family, commitment, and respect for others from her parents. Having worked with her for many years now, we can see that she brings these values to her profession and her community advocacy. The first in her family to attend college, JoAnne graduated with a bachelor's degree in communication sciences, completed a master's degree in education of the deaf, and earned a law degree from Fordham University, where she attended night classes while working full-time. Assemblymember Simon established a disability civil rights law firm in downtown Brooklyn and is a nationally recognized expert in her field. She's been a member of the New York State Assembly since 2015, and it's been our great pleasure to work with her on education issues. Again, Assemblymember Simon, thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you would like to make any additional remarks.
I don't know that I need to say anything else, except I'm delighted to be here and I'm really excited to hear from the rest of the panelists and from our parents.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it looks like Dr. Gore has joined us. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm gonna scroll back up to her bio, and here's what we have. Dr. Tara Gore is an adolescent psychologist at the Brooklyn Learning Center. She earned her doctorate in school psychology with a bilingual concentration from Fordham University in 2019, more Fordham grads. She is currently completing her postdoctoral training in pediatric neuropsychology at Brooklyn Learning Center and BLC psychology Tribeca. Dr. Gore has experience working in local school district and private practices in the tri-state area and primarily practices within a cognitive behavioral therapy framework. Trained also in dialectical behavioral therapy, parent management training, and child-centered play therapy. She's interested in the impact of social and emotional factors on learning and academic functioning. She strives to combine learning strategies, theories of child development, motivational techniques, and neuropsychological test data to provide treatments that value each child's unique qualities. Thank you, Dr. Gore, for joining us. There you go. Hi. Did you want to say a couple of words yourself before we jump into the questions?
Sure, of course. Well, as Ayana introduced me so well, I'm Dr. Tara Gore. I'm a child and adolescent psychologist with the Brooklyn Learning Center. Within my role over there, I primarily conduct neuropsychological evaluations and psychotherapy with children who are presenting with academic, behavioral, or social emotional difficulties at home or in the classroom. I'm also a part of the homework therapy program at Brooklyn Learning Center. Homework therapy is a model of treatment in which we combine psychotherapy and tutoring, in which we work with children who experience social emotional challenges such as behavioral issues, low frustration tolerance, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, as it relates to their academic difficulties. And so we provide academic remediation in a therapeutically supportive setting, and so that they can learn tools to cope with their emotions. I've worked with kids from kindergarten through 12th grade and with children who have learning disorders, ADHD, autism, you name it. Thanks for having me. I look forward to being a part of this panel tonight.
Thank you so much for being here, distinguished panelists. And also, we've got so many great people in the audience who are also resources. So if you can, I see right on my screen right now, Carol Himes from New York Peace Institute. If you want to wave, and anybody who has questions about mediation, put those in the chat. If you have questions that you haven't put up sent to us earlier, please put those in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Bess and Jessica to get things started.
Hello, everybody. And I'm Bess. And Jess, do you want to wave? That's Jess. I'm on the CEC13 as the secretary, and I have 2 kids, one who was in a District 75 school for most of elementary and middle, and has now mainstreamed to an ICT setting with an IEP. And I have another son with an IEP, and I live in District 15. So we have asked, for questions beforehand. They were collected in advance on this survey, but like was mentioned a couple times, please drop additional questions in the chat. And if we have time, we will certainly get to them. And as was just explained, we have so many amazing resources right here in this room right now. Don't leave without reaching out, and don't leave without getting that question down so we can get back to you. It's so important to us, right? Thumbs up, Ayana. It's really cool. All right, so if you were calling in and have a question, press 9 and press *9 to comment, and we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. There are many, it seems, DOE representatives on the call, and we invite them to answer the DOE related questions if possible. So since there's so many of you and I am less familiar, Camille or Ayana or whoever knows who those folks are, if you could do the calling on DOE staff, and if the staff could do the raise hand, that would be really helpful for me and I think for Jess. Okay, so we're going to start right away. The first question is going to be for Assembly Member Simon. The question is, over the last year, roughly 48,000 of the city's students with disabilities have missed or only partially received services, as we've discussed, right? Can you speak about the New York State Assembly Member Andrew Havesi's letter and the recommendations for students with disabilities? You're muted still.
I turn it off so that you don't hear me, and then I forget, so sorry. So yeah, so there was a letter that was sent by Assembly Member Andrew Havesi, myself, and Assembly Member Bobby Carroll, as well as Council Member Mark Traeger. And, we did, and it was signed off on by something like 48 elected officials, I believe, both at the state and the city level. And, there was a survey that was done by a group of parents who had just been reaching out because we knew that so many of our kids were not getting the services. We didn't know how widespread it was. We didn't know what variations of that. So for example, if a child is supposed to be in an ICT program and the Department of Education says, okay, you're still in your ICT program, but you only have 1 teacher. Is that really meeting the IEP? Is that really consistent with placement? Many of us would argue that is not. By the same token, the student was perhaps getting many of the other services that they were entitled to through their IEP in that environment. So this survey really just looked at issues of class size, about staffing ratios, whether there was enough structure for students who were in self-contained classes, the lack of remote instruction and small group support that students needed now more than they might have before. And just a lack of access to the paraprofessional services that so many students need, of course. And normally those are provided in person. Now, some of us elected officials all along really believe that when bringing students back to school, that the Department of Education should really have prioritized those kids with IEPs, in particular, those kids in District 75 and those kids with programs that were really more hands-on and really needed additional supports in the school, because for so many of our students, remote learning is just not going to work. It's very hard to do speech therapy with 3-year-olds on Zoom. We know that there is so much variation in the population of kids with special needs. And so we were concerned about that. The school did eventually come around to prioritizing those students, but it took quite a bit of time. So we were very concerned about that. Both Assemblymember Carroll and Assemblymember Hevesy, who was chair of the Social Services Committee, and now he's chair of the Children and Families Committee, was very concerned about that. We sent the letter to the mayor about that. And of course, it was from the survey, there was a report that was written. I know you can find that online. We have not gotten a response back from the city to the particular points, but I would say that the city has started addressing a number of the issues that we raised in this letter.
Thank you very much. I also just want to mention that Robert Kopack, the director of the Special Ed for Brooklyn North, has joined us.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Jess for another question. We're going to tag team back and forth. Jess?
Thanks, Beth. Hi, everyone. Jessica Simmons, CEC13, IEP parent recording secretary, mom to a third grader at PS 133. We got such a great variety of questions. So Beth and I are going to be jumping around a little bit to make sure everybody's questions get answered, because there's actually folks here who have very specific questions about services. And there's also some folks who have come tonight who are asking questions such as this. What are some of the signs that a child may need an IEP or any other type of support in school? And how can I go about getting my child assessed to see if they qualify for support? So I'm thinking one of our panelists could take that one for us.
RueZalia, maybe.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in.
Well, go ahead, please, Dr. Andreotti.
Oh, no, please go.
So, first of all, families, parents have to trust their judgment. When you don't see that your child is making as much progress as perhaps you know they could, sometimes families have experiences where they know there's certain things that their child is able to do, but when it comes to school, there seems to be a gap in functioning. I think that anytime there's a gap, or especially now when we're dealing with such so many instructional deficits, I don't call it learning loss. Learning loss implies that the students received instruction and have lost the lessons that they received. So forgive me, but I always use instructional deficits. So especially now when there's so many gaps in students functioning, parents need to move forward and to request an IEP, to request an evaluation, especially now. Now when there's so many different factors that are affecting our lives, wellness is an issue, attention is an issue, anxiety is an issue. So I think it's best for parents to take that step and write a request for an IEP evaluation.
Thank you. Charissa or Tara, would either of you like to speak to any other advice you have for parents who are asking themselves this question?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've been working with a lot of families on is parents telling me that they're seeing a different child right now than perhaps a year ago. A year ago, they had a child who enjoyed school, who enjoyed learning, who was curious about certain topics, and that they're no longer seeing that. They're seeing a child who's, easily frustrated, who does not want to sit in front of the computer and do Zoom, or doesn't want to do really anything that, resembles academic work anymore. And I think that from a mental health standpoint is another indicator right now, especially that a child going into, this marking period and then, potentially this upcoming academic year may benefit from, additional services and or an IEP. And this would be the time to get on top of it and to request, an assessment through the DOE.
I think it could be helpful to even chime in about, there are two routes you could go. One, it could be an assessment through the DOE or a neuropsychological evaluation. And I think it'd be helpful to understand the differences between the two as well. So, the DOE, like as RueZalia and Charissa had mentioned, you submit a request with the DOE for an evaluation, and then within a certain period of time, they have to complete the evaluation. A neuropsychological evaluation relative to a DOE evaluation is a little bit more comprehensive. So if you're looking, for example, a diagnosis for your child, does my child have a specific learning disability? Does my child have ADHD? Is my child struggling with anxiety? A neuropsychological evaluation can provide you with an actual diagnosis, whereas a DOE evaluation, you'll get an IEP classification, such as an umbrella term like learning disability, autism, speech language impairment. It is very, so you won't necessarily get a diagnosis if you do an evaluation with a school psychologist. In addition, the evaluation that you might do with a school psychologist in the schools would include, IQ, cognitive testing, or academic achievement. There may also be like a social emotional component to it as well. But a neuropsychological evaluation may include measuring a child's executive functioning skills, their attention, a more thorough assessment of their social emotional functioning, as well as like their memory and other skills that are important for learning and like social emotional development. So, of course, a neuropsychological evaluation does cost money, whereas a DOE evaluation does not. So those are other things to consider. But I think sometimes it's helpful for parents to understand the difference between the two.
Thank you. And just to clarify, is it possible to get a neuropsychological evaluation through the DOE?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Actually, there are a lot of people that are requesting psychologicals now to be done privately. There have been a lot of situations where people were able to get private neuropsychological evaluations. I just wonder about the quality of, first of all, if you can get a neuropsychological from your particular district. And secondly, I always wonder about the quality of that evaluation. I'm so glad that Dr. Gore is with us today. And I'm looking at her and I'm saying, wow, how do I get my kids to her for a neuropsychological evaluation? Because when you ask the Department of Education, yes, you can ask them specifically for neuropsych, and you have to have the reasons why. You can also ask them for a private psychological evaluation. There's just, for me, always this question about quality, because it's private does not mean that it's always good. And then you're sometimes stuck. But yes, DOE will pay for those evaluations.
Thank you for clarifying that.
If I could also just jump in with my, I know enough to be dangerous experience, and that is that, from a legal point of view, what the schools do is classify within 13 categories in the special education statute, which is the IDEA. And in each umbrella category, there are multiple diagnoses that could be. So the school's job is to classify and provide special educational services. The school's jobs are not necessarily to diagnose. Now, for some kids, there may not be that much of a difference, but I always feel that the schools are, when it comes to like learning disabilities, which is a large category of the groups of kids that we are serving, is that they're giving more of an academic assessment. I'll see whether you are reading, on what test you're going to score and what level, but they do much less with regard to the processing that's involved. So that's what would be like a difference between the neuropsych, for example, and an educational assessment, is that the neuropsych is really looking at what are those skills and abilities and what are those processes and what are the deficits that I might be seeing that might indicate that something else is going on there. It might not even be something you would see in the evaluation that the school does.
Thank you. Our next
Can I just jump in?
question.
Sorry. Just, as long as we're talking about private evaluations, I just, would like to, put out there the project that I managed for, 6 years at the Child Mind Institute. It's still going strong. It's called the Healthy Brain Network, and they are providing no cost evaluations to up to 10,000 kids from all over New York City. It is not what I would call an absolutely comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, but it is more comprehensive than what you would receive through the DOE. And as I mentioned, it is no cost. So for some families, that is helpful, and they will provide you this diagnosis that we're talking about.
Thank you. So our next question is, what is a special education advocate? When and why would you want or need one, and how do you get one? And I wanted to actually start with Carol Himes to just talk to us a little bit about advocacy and mediation and what parents should know about it.
Thanks. So I'm very happy to speak about mediation. I can touch on advocacy, but I'm not an advocate for sure. I am definitely a mediator. So a mediator is a neutral person. And by law, under IDEA, when parents of kids who have a disability or they're suspecting they have a disability and schools have differences about program or placement or services not delivered or what should be delivered, basically the law says there are two paths to follow. One is to go to a hearing. Everybody knows what a hearing is. You go to this judge-like person. They're called a hearing officer. They're like a judge, and there's evidence gathered, and that person then renders a decision. And that's one way to get a decision. But the other way to do it, and the program that I'm responsible for families of kids that attend school in Brooklyn and Manhattan, is called mediation. And that's free. It's the same as a hearing would be free. Parents and schools, if they agree to meet together to discuss these concerns, a concern about a child that's not making progress, but the school feels that they're doing the appropriate thing, or the parent just is concerned about progress or what the placement might be. They meet with a mediator. Parents and schools meet with a mediator. We're doing it now on Zoom, just like we meet here. And mediators help them have their conversation, consider what their concerns are, consider what their options might be, and then support them in resolving the matter if they wish to do so. The mediators don't opine. We are not advocates. We do certainly know a lot of advocates, and we can do some referrals to advocates, but we're not advocates. Our job is to be neutral. If the matter is resolved, the mediator writes an agreement right then and there. It's legally binding. And if there are IEP changes, they have to be made. By law, the IEP team has to meet very promptly and implement them. So, for example, if as a group, the parent and the representative of the schools agree that the child should increase speech services from twice a week to 3 times a week, the IEP team has to meet immediately and update the IEP for that purpose. The benefits of this are a couple things. First of all, parents and schools really know their kids far better than anybody else, and they can really craft an approach if they wish that really addresses that child. Matters are resolved very, very frequently. I think our statistics are somewhere in the 80% range, so it's effective. And we get people together awfully quickly. Hearings take a super long time, and we all know that addressing concerns with kids really is what schools want to do, it's what parents want to do, and it's really best if there's a concern and if there's a remedy that they wish to address and implement, better to get it in sooner than later. So that I can answer questions.
Thank you.
That's a little summary.
I appreciate that, and sorry that I collapsed the two phrases. Mediator and advocate are not the same. If we could have one of our other panelists, if you have some thoughts on an advocate, what does a special education advocate do? And when and where would a parent call in an advocate versus a mediator?
So in my experience, advocates are lay advocates. They are allowed to appear in special education hearings, so you don't have to have a lawyer. And that is true, for example, in Social Security hearings, in veterans hearings, and that is something that is in part of the federal legislation. And the reason for that is they don't want to make everybody have to go out and hire a lawyer. And there are a lot of advocates that many of them started off as moms who learned the system, and they were helped by other parents, and they are now helping other parents. So many of those special ed advocates are people who are very knowledgeable about the law. They're also very knowledgeable about the school systems in which they work with, so that they can really be very helpful to parents in guiding them through a hearing, or in just, reaching agreement with the school district. Whether it goes to mediation or not, you may not even need to do that if you have a skilled advocate who can go with you to that IEP meeting and fight for you.
Can I just add that advocates often do go to mediation as well if parents want to. So it's totally fine. It's not an either or proposition. And I'll put contact information in the chat if anybody wants to. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you. Bess, back to you.
For
Okay.
me,
Did it
This
already.
is a very specific question, and I think we'll start with Dr. Andreotti. It's about executive function. Okay, so the part of the brain that does the organizing. Maybe you'll talk to that a little bit first, in case people are unfamiliar with that that term. So the question is, what are the best strategies to help children with low executive functioning skills to not fall through the cracks during this hybrid remote learning period?
Sure. Well, I think that's a great question, because what I've been noticing in working with families is this whole remote learning operation requires a lot of executive function. All the subjects are on different websites with different logins, and things have to be printed and uploaded, and that is really difficult. So when people ask me what is executive function, I give them the example of, say you're hosting Thanksgiving dinner, and you are having 10 people, and there will be 9 dishes, and half of them have to be heated and half of them have to be chilled. How are you going to do that? It takes a lot of thought and organization and these very high level cognitive skills that separate us essentially from other mammals. And these are often the last skills or inabilities to develop in the human brain. They're often ones that are more delayed in developing in kids with issues such as ADHD, with mood disorders, anxiety, and autism spectrum disorders. So right now is a really tough time for kids with executive function difficulties. So what I've been, advocating for parents to do is to have a game plan. If every morning you need to wake up and check all the websites and print out all the materials, then that's what you need to do. But it is essentially a schedule and a routine that you as a family follow daily in order to make sure that all of the tasks are complete. This is going to probably involve some system of checklists, and then at the end of the day, accepting that we might not get it all done. We might miss some things. But unfortunately, the bad news here that I've been noticing, just to be realistic, is with the way that a lot of remote learning is currently set up, kids, and especially kids with executive deficits, just need a lot of parental support. And sadly, I know that's not possible in every home with 2 working parents, etc. So, for kids to be able to help themselves, I use the analogy of, learning to ride a bike. You're there, you're holding on to the back, then you're running alongside, and then finally the kid's doing it on their own. But, initially, I really recommend that parents dig deep, figure out all of the details of all the complicated systems that the kids are using, create the system that then they can scaffold for their kids to eventually hopefully gain independence in using before, the end of the year, when we go back to perhaps the old way of doing things. But that's kind of the best I've got, given all of the situations with remote learning and all the different websites that I've been hearing about.
Is there anyone else who would like to, I'm conscious of time because we have so many amazing questions happening in the chat too. So anyone briefly want to talk about executive function in any of our panelists?
I just want to echo what Dr. Andreotti said, because she's spot on with that. I think executive functioning skills are things that are still very much developing in children, especially younger kids. And we have, kindergartners, first graders, second graders who now have to balance these multiple demands in these multiple portals. So checklists are incredibly helpful. Creating this routine with your child, we're like, okay, first we're going to check these 3 portals that we need to do. Let's make a list of everything that needs to be done today. And constantly checking and double checking, having that routine, helping children prioritize tasks can also be helpful. I find that the approach of prioritizing tasks from most difficult to easiest can be helpful as well, because at the end of a school day, that's when we have the most energy, the most cognitive, the most brain power. And so that's when we want to really assert our brain power on the most challenging tasks and then work our way down to the things that are easier as we become more fatigued. So being able to structure tasks in a way that can, is easier for our children to manage can be really helpful as well. And again, when we're done with our schoolwork, we go back to that checklist. Did I upload everything that I needed to? Did I finish all these assignments? And, create this regular routine that becomes more of a habit for our kids. And that can definitely go a long way. And I think given the challenges that are going on these days, sometimes we have to accept that we might not always get everything done. But, creating this routine can help us go a long way.
Thank you so much. And I just want to go back a moment because Ms. Watkins wanted to answer the question about advocacy and mediation. And such an important, and please check the chat link for all these great links so that you families can get the support you need. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that in our way of thinking, an advocate is someone who's able to tap into the strengths of a parent, a child, and a family to help them get to where they need to go to improve the instruction and education outcomes, for that child and for that family. There are many people now that they say they're doing advocacy, but actually what they're doing is information and referral. Call this number, ask this person. But an advocate is someone that spends enough time with that family to identify their strengths, to clarify what their goals are, and to help the family to create a path that gets them there. Thank you for that time.
Thank you so much. That is, I think, a really important distinction and hits right to the heart of this matter. That's my personal moment there. A question now, zooming out to the DOE people on, and of course, any of our esteemed panelists can answer this too. It's a long one. It's a 3-part question, and we are, so happy that so many people wrote in. So I don't know who to point this to, but maybe Ayanna and Camille can help. Part 1. Is it accurate that there is a backlog of impartial hearings? And if so, do any of our panelists know that, or any of you guys know the number of backlog cases or where one could find that information? So let's, 2, the second part to that is to address backlogs, assuming there is one, I think that has been reported, although I'm not 100% sure, the DOE can use mediation as an alternative to hearings. Does anyone know if mediation is now being utilized more? And again, is that data being kept? And if so, where? And the third part of this question is, for families who do utilize mediation, is there a list of pre-approved remedies so that families understand what options they have for them? Thank you. And I don't know who to call on.
Will somebody raise their virtual hands? Because there are so many people in this that it's hard for me to, oh, okay, there you go.
Okay, so I have no idea what the backlog is, but there is a backlog. There is always a backlog. For the last 40 years, there's been a backlog. Sometimes that backlog is worse than others, but there's always a backlog. We have so many kids in our school system that there's never a time when there isn't a backlog. That backlog was exacerbated for some time because they didn't have enough hearing officers. And part of that was because they weren't paying hearing officers. They were paying them less in New York City than anywhere else. So it was hard to get a hearing officer to take a case. I think there's been some resolution of that. And then the other issue about mediation versus a hearing. Yes, the schools can encourage you to go to mediation. But both parties have to agree. So the right to go to a hearing is a parental right. If the parent does not want to go to mediation, either because they are fearful of it, or they don't believe that it was successful for them in the past, or whatever, they can't be forced into mediation by the DOE. So parents should know that, which doesn't mean they shouldn't take them up on that offer if it might work. But also, if mediation doesn't work, you don't lose your right to go to a hearing. You can still always go to a hearing if mediation turns out not to be successful. And about the pre-approved list, if I was the DOE, I would never send out a list. You might get some idea of common accommodations or common resolutions from, for example, the Peace Institute, people who do mediation. But if I'm the school district, I'm never going to give out a list, because somebody will sue me based on the list. And also, it is really meant to be highly individualized. And so the problem, you don't want to encourage anybody in the situation to say, well, I want this one, and because I don't like that one, when what might work for your child is something else entirely. And so we want that to be an open and creative process of addressing your child's needs.
Thank you for that. Robert Kopack, you had a response to this question as well? Please unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, the Zoom thing. No, I think Representative really, she hit the nail on the head with that. I mean, we are, my team is specifically, I'm the director for special ed. I have folks on my team who first work in the resolution phase, and we are encouraged and being trained further in regards to going to mediation as a possible resolution than ever in the past. So I think that's just an important, but we also discussed the wide range of options that are available and trying to settle at the resolution phase at this point, as opposed to going to hearing and kind of dealing with, I think, what was discussed earlier, which is a more involved process. And that's really what the role of folks in my office, when they talk with parents, do, is really explain to them all the different options that are available to the families. And, it's usually becomes a very personal experience where, the folks in my office, the administrator of special ed in particular, get to know the family, get to know, what is going on. They work with the school, they try and figure out what is happening, if it's something that was from the past, which happens a lot with these, where it's like, a few school years, of issues that are brought up. They also contact prior schools and try and figure out what exactly is going on and what is the best remedy for the child. And so, yeah, I wanted just to kind of add that piece to it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to, and I'm going to just remind people, because we have so much good stuff in the chat. Let's keep our answers as succinct as we can. Not that anyone is not doing that, but I'm just very mindful of the time. This is a question about dyslexia, probably reading and writing and dysgraphia, I would think. Is there any guidance on what's going on, basically the latest update on universal screening? I know that that's something Simon has been working on. And then also kind of further, if you suspect, like what Ms. Watkins was saying, your gut is telling you your child is sort of falling behind and what one might call borderline, not clinically significant for some of these issues, what are some interventions, and this is maybe where the panelists can come in too, that can be done, and what is the time frame between that first assessment and then, like, how long do you have to wait before another one if you feel like it didn't kind of show? We have a lot of parents saying, I was assessed and I was denied. And oftentimes it's coming up in reading and writing. So that middle space, so that you're in like what, first, second, third, and then by fourth, it might be too late. How does one navigate that especially around the issue in dyslexia? So Ms. Watkins, do you have a response for that? Or Ms. Gore, Andreotti?
It's interesting when I hear questions like this, because I'm always reminded, I think years ago, I read a stat that said most children, most students begin to drop out at 4th grade. So yes, there are certainly, even while you may be working on getting an IEP, or maybe you're not sure, there has to be a way to sit down with the school and to come up with some kind of intervention. There's still RTI, okay? There's still all types of academic support. There are literacy programs. None of these things that I'm mentioning are adequate, especially in a virtual environment. But we still have to put it out there that there are these different pockets. So there may be a literacy coach connected with a particular school that might be able to help your student. There may be some other form of academic intervention that could temporarily help your student. The specific thing is for you to know where's the pocket that your student, your child needs help with. Okay, and then go and ask them to come up with a plan. Where's the extra help for my student? So you still have to fight whether you're going to get an IEP or not, especially nowadays. So there are things that a parent can look for or ask for, even though none of us would think that they are adequate, especially today in the era of COVID.
So let me address that, and then I think probably Dr. Gore, you might have something to say, or maybe you want to talk first. But when it comes to issues like dyslexia, we know that there are signs that we can see early on that a child might be dyslexic. The problem is most parents don't know what those signs are, and most teachers don't know what those signs are. And that is why we really need to change the way we're teaching teachers how to teach reading, so that they are learning to teach reading according to the science of reading. That's another bill I have. The reason that will make a difference is that they will recognize some of these signs. Now, it may be that a child might not need a full IEP, but if you if the general ed teacher can target instruction accordingly, you can stop that reading failure from happening. You can scaffold and give kids the skills that they need. And if a referral for special ed is needed, you can give a better referral with more information backed up because you've tried something and that has not worked, or you tried X and that worked. And so it's about learning phonics, it's about phonemic awareness, it's about building comprehension. And the 5 areas of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics instruction, fluency, vocabulary, reading comprehension are the 5 pillars of reading, but most teachers don't yet know that. So we have to work on that score. The reason to do early screening is the early screening, if it's not just about academic achievement, but is about sort of those processing, where are those things that are the warning signs? We can identify a child who's at risk for reading disability early on and be able to give them more attention when they are younger, so that they don't end up by the end of 1st grade feeling stupid and already starting to think that school is bad and not right for them.
Yeah, I think early identification and intervention is key, because I would say around the 3rd, 4th grade level is when you have that shift from learning to read to reading to learn. Because then you find that if this is a student who's already struggling with reading, and now we've gotten to a point in their education where to learn additional academic material, whether it's science, social studies, reading math, word problems, they're going to be struggling in those areas as well, because their reading skills are not as developed for them to understand that higher order material. So then you'll see the child drowning, unfortunately. So as I said, early identification is key. So and evidence-based interventions for that is also important. So that's some of the goals of RTI. And you hope that teachers are implementing evidence-based interventions that are targeted towards phonics if you find that the child is struggling with sounding out words, or interventions that are based on like sight word recognition, depending on the child's individual difficulties. So that's the goal, and that's the ideal, and we can only hope. But sometimes parents have some circumstances where the child is evaluated and they don't find anything, as what I saw in one of the comment boxes. And so now I'm going to go back to my previous spiel about how a neuropsych can be helpful, because those evaluations are also really in-depth and thorough and look at the specific aspects of reading and can give you a better idea of what exactly your child's, what area of reading your child's difficulties lie in, and then they might be more thoroughly assessed and you can get some more answers that way.
I was just gonna add, thank you, Dr. Gore. So my own daughter is actually in 3rd grade and she's exactly in that reading to learn phase. And one thing that, and usually, you know, us that are actually in the field are almost the worst at trying to figure this out. You know, the irony of the whole thing, right? And I was talking to my wife the other night, and you know, my daughter struggles, and especially in math word problems. I mean, it's, you know, it's doing so many different things at once now, and you know, trying to do multi-step and then read the problem and read the directions, and you know, she, you know, it becomes an issue. And you know, one of the things I was talking to my wife about, and she always says, "Well, take off your, you know, your hat, your educator hat." Okay, I'm not. But was how much time during the day, during they have a period of essentially it's kind of a period where they do reading or now it's typing because everyone's on computers now, you know. So I said, how many times is she actually, you know, working on more phonics type based, you know, and because that ends. Just in general, I'm not even talking about the DOE at 2nd grade, after 2nd grade, right? And that's usually when the assessments start. So I think it's very important as for parents to understand that just because your child is, you know, entering the 3rd grade, so to speak, which is usually that turnaround time, does not mean that they still may not need those one-on-one interventions for, you know, to really get them to be comfortable where they're at. Not all children, and we all know this, you know, will learn the harder words just through, you know, natural, you know, at that point. And that's kind of, so that's, I mean, you know, when we were kids, it was phonics, but it's changed over the years. And so I think that's an important piece. So I just want to throw that in there.
So we have just a few last minutes here, and as Bess and I were looking through the questions, we did notice there's a common trend both in the chat and in the questions submitted beforehand, which just has to do with the level of frustration of parents and parents of IEP students who just feel like their kid's IEP isn't being met. And not only that their child's IEP isn't being met, but that they're then bringing it to the school and the school is telling them that it is, or that their concern isn't a concern, or that it is, and they're explaining it in a way that doesn't make sense to the parent. And so I'm just wondering, both from our panel and from our DOE folks here, what do you want, what should parents be doing and saying? Because I think for us on the CEC, we tell parents, advocate for yourself, we'll come, we'll support you. But when the parents go to the school and then the school says, no, we're doing it, and the parents feel bad because school leaders are so stressed right now with everything they're doing, what else can we be doing, and how can we be working together to make sure that 100% of students are getting 100% of their IEP mandates met as it should be 100% of the time?
So, I mean, so sorry. You know, I'll kind of jump in there, and I know this is also, you know, the Chalkbeat article came out this morning, and I saw that in the chat. So, you know, we all know it's a difficult time, and you are right. You know, schools, principals, hats off to and the teachers, you know, what everybody is trying to do for our babies right now, and we do know that. We do know that. But our children are our children, right? And that's a really important piece here. And so, you know, what I would say from personal experience doing what I do, which is a lot of exactly what you're talking about, and kind of working with schools and parents and trying to, you know, figure this thing out. This is, we're humans, you know, let's figure this out. Is that, you know, I personally felt that the Chalkbeat article, it was clear, and then there were portions in it where they really did say that, you know, this is a very crazy time, and when, you know, look, let's talk about what this means, you know, what these data means. And, you know, one portion of it was, I think, exactly what you were just kind of hinting towards, right? As a parent, you have to ask yourself, if you see a number on a spreadsheet that says X amount of kids are receiving their services, is my child one of those kids that isn't or is, right? I think that's the biggest piece, because, those are numbers that are snapshots in time and they're taken off of databases and systems. And I'm not going to get into the whole details of it, but really as parents, we have to ask ourselves, is my child getting what he or she needs, right? And I think that's an important piece, because, and then the next part of it, as you're talking about, which is what do we do if we feel he or she is not? What do we do? And the first avenue is absolutely to go talk to the principal, or I'd say the first avenue is talk to the teacher, obviously. And then, see how they, we can make sure that whatever is happening, whether it's a blended, whether the student is in there for 4 days or 5 days, whether it's fully remote, whatever it may be, what are the services in the IEP that are being, appropriately, and what does that mean by appropriately? And I think that's the biggest piece. And so, the kind of going way back in time to when we talked, I think maybe it was CEC13 about the pads, and, about the idea of, this is how, during this crazy time, we're going to make sure that our children get what they need, and really revisiting that with the school. That's kind of the answer I'm going to give you in terms of revisiting the pads and saying, okay, this was something that we had discussed. Does it need to be updated? Things have shifted. We're now in 5 days, or we're still in 2 and 3 cohort, whatever it may be. And then specifically, what it is. If you do not get a satisfactory answer, then I would say, you are welcome to call or email the special ed office. We do get meaning me, as one of the directors, to get very quickly turnaround saying that, a parent was trying to work things out with the school and resolve, and, we weren't able to. Can someone from the district office kind of help out with this? And, we have a parent, I call her a parent guru, I don't know, Zoe Lenskowicz, who's in my office, and she usually gets these calls, 311s and all of them, call a parent right away, what's going on, let's try and figure this out. And sometimes, the school says, I didn't realize, that this wasn't exactly what was happening, and we try and resolve it at that. So, I would say that, to continue that, and then to reach out and work with each other like you are. And I know you guys are. I know this is 13 and 15 together. These are 2 different districts working together. They're not far different geographically, but to figure this out. And, yeah, whoever, thank you about Zoe. She is amazing. She is so supportive. I love having her. I can't ask for a better person. But again, that goes back to the fact that we're all humans. And so, I just want to kind of end on saying that if you have questions, obviously talk to the school. If you feel that you're not getting through for some reason or whatever, and you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed, I don't know what to do, don't feel that you can't email the special ed office or call the Borough Center or call Zoe and just say, hey, can you help out on my hand? Or call Anita's office, Brenda and Anita's office, saying, hey, or Superintendent Samuel's office to say, hey, can we, get some help here? Okay, we're here to work. We're here to work together. So
I know we're just about out of time. Are there any other quick thoughts on that from other folks before we close out?
Yes, quick. Parents need to know what the service is, when their child is supposed to have it. This is when you need a good, I wanted to say 59-cent composition book, but I guess I'm old because they must be $5 by now. But just to keep track in a book. Keep track of what your child is having difficulty with, keep track of what services they're supposed to have, keep track of everything that's on their pad, on that document that they signed, so that when they go to ask for help, they are clear, they have a foundation. Last thing, someone in the chat said that, what do you do about an 11th grader that's struggling? And I think that's the case. The Child Mind Institute is great, they're great period, but especially for somebody that's in 11th grade, because they need to get an evaluation and get help right away. That's it for me, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Ms. Watkins. Ayana, we're going to turn it over to you for introduction to Ms. Watts.
I did not see Executive Superintendent Watts in the participant list. I don't know if she signed on as with a different name or if she got booted. So
Ayana, it's Anita.
hi.
Hi. So Karen had conflicts and she was toggling back and forth. She had asked that we reach out to her to let her know near the end of the meeting so she could come on. So I'm going to text her right now to let her know.
I'm sorry,
Okay,
I'm
great.
from TNI, from the Translation and Interpretation Unit. I'm just interrupting to say that we have a question in Spanish on the chat section. I don't know if you want to allow for the interpreters to read it.
Yes. Please do.
Or I'll read it and then the interpreters that way can just interpret. So the question says, what is the plan for students with disabilities to receive the services they have lost since the beginning of the pandemic? ¿Cuál es el plan para que los estudiantes con discapacidades reciban los servicios que han perdido desde el inicio de la pandemia?
So I'm going to take that one. Good evening, everybody. What I want to say is that if you are aware of this, the chancellor and the mayor have put out a 6-point plan talking about how they're going to address learning loss. And the first step in it is they are looking as a city at a assessment, a diagnostic assessment, not a high stakes test, not an evaluation of a school, but a diagnostic assessment so that kids can be screened and we can see where they need additional support. In addition, there is going to be professional development for teachers in addressing this. Further, Jordan, you're 100% right, but it addresses all kids and we will make sure it addresses students with disabilities. What I want to say is that the professional development is important. And one of the things that is something that we're looking at is we're looking at strategies that cross and transcend D75 to regular community districts. There are a lot of people who have a lot of skills and there are conversations that are being had as to what are the strategies that we can use to support our kids that have been tried and true with kids who really struggle and have been very successful. So that's something they're looking at. And then developing the teachers in utilizing the strategies. I really understand completely. Those of you who know me know that I have a grandson who's autistic. And so this is very near and dear to my heart. And our kids in our district are very near and dear to all of our hearts. I speak for Kamar and I speak for Allison as well. Every kid matters. And so we want to make sure that this is the best. So we are waiting to hear from Central as to what the diagnostic will be. Schools will have a handle on it. They are looking at additional supports and we will keep you posted as to how this is going to shake out as we go forward.
Assembly
Anita.
person, I'm sorry, Assembly Person Simons, I wanted to ask you a question. Is there any word about compensatory education for students, special needs students that have missed their services? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just wanted to know if you heard anything about whether a parent of a special needs child can be compensated for the services that they missed during COVID.
Well, a compensatory education is educational. It's not like compensating. It's not like monetary.
Correct.
Right. I just wanted to make sure everybody in the audience knew that. You know, that is, we tend to, in the Assembly, our issues with regard to education tend to be around budget and around big numbers, and not, for example, around specific policies that the Department of Education has decided to implement. We certainly can raise those issues with the department. We just had a hearing with the Department of Education, and many of us ask questions that are not strictly budget questions when we're in those hearings. And so we can try and communicate that. But compensatory education is something that is always available as a possible remedy. It is a remedy that is granted infrequently because it's usually in circumstances where the child just didn't get education for a period of time that was fairly significant. But I think that this is one of those times where the notion of somebody just simply not getting the education that they should have gotten because of not having a device, not having the ability to connect because of Wi-Fi, and also just the way students are having to learn in a sort of two-dimensional environment without the kind of feedback they have in person, the load on working memory and attention. I think that those arguments and the evidence would be a little different as a result of our experience with COVID. Exactly what that will be, I don't know, but I suspect it may be.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you to everybody who's been here and to all of our panelists. I want to say something before I turn it over to Executive Superintendent Watts that I think I said in March of 2020. This pandemic has shined a light on all of the inequities in this system, all of the holes, all of the things that are not working. We've seen, miracles from the DOE, from teachers and administrators in our schools. But this is a moment where we could really make a difference, make change, and fix those inequities and fix those things that aren't working. If we center the needs of the children who are most in need, who are getting the least in our system, we can change it for all of our kids. So I want to turn it over to the executive superintendent, and I want to thank you all again for being here, for having this conversation. This is not the last time we're going to come together to have this conversation. So thank you. Executive Superintendent Watts.
Thank you so much, CEC President Beheen. Thank you, CEC President Casaretti, for inviting me here this evening to bring closing remarks at this wonderful event. Good evening to all in the District 13 and the District 15 community. Thank you for attending this event so that you can learn from the wonderful panelists that were assembled today to speak with you. Before I go into my remarks, I just would like to respond to that question. Thank you, Superintendent Scott, for answering. I just wanted to add that if there is a specific student or family that needs support, to please reach out to us and we will take it from there. All right, it's easy. I'm K Watts at schools.nyc.gov. I'll also put it in the chat. All right. So I just want to start by saying, well, it's Black History Month, so I want to wish everyone happy Black History Month. This week was also Respect for All Week, and tomorrow we're celebrating the Lunar New Year, so I want to wish everyone a happy Lunar New Year as well. And for students and educators who might be on the line, a happy midwinter break. I want to thank both of the CECs for this collaboration and joint meeting. It's great when we work across districts because there are similar concerns of families across districts. My name is Karen Watts. I'm the Executive Superintendent of Brooklyn North. That includes 7 community districts, including districts 13 and 15. And I just want to say that the topics that were discussed today are timely. What this pandemic has shown is that there is real need for mental health services, and also that our students with special needs need all of the support that we can provide. Our most vulnerable students need, the most attention and the most support. And that's what we try to do in Brooklyn North. We work very closely with our schools, with our principals, to ensure that our students with special needs would be able to attend school more often, and the ones who are able to go in physically into buildings, the elementary students, and then the middle schools will be joining them shortly. We are prioritizing students with special needs or English language learners for more days of on-site instruction so that they can get the supports they need. Our students with disabilities have struggled in remote learning, and our teachers have done a wonderful job, but it's great to continue to support them on site. So that's what we're looking to do now. Our principals are working very hard to ensure that we can accommodate as many of the blended students in every school for as many days as possible. For, of course, maximum of 5 days. So thank you all for this wonderful event this evening. We are going to continue at Brooklyn North to support all of our schools through all of the changes that the pandemic has brought, and continue to ensure that our students are connecting to learning, and more importantly, learning. Our teachers are continuing to deliver standards-aligned lessons, aligned to the priority standards. These are standards that were identified by the Department of Education to help to address any learning loss that our students might have experienced during remote learning. And so I have been pleased in going into many remote classrooms across Brooklyn North and seeing the wonderful work that our teachers continue to do with our students to ensure that if there is any learning loss, it's minimal. And the hope is that there is none, and that our students are thriving and will end this school year strong. I just looked at the results from the first semester across Brooklyn North in comparison to the results at this time last year, that was before the pandemic. And our students are doing much better when it comes to getting to grade level work or beyond. So we'll continue to support all of our schools and ensure that they're delivering the very best education given the circumstances. And as more students can return to physical buildings, that's what we will support schools in doing. And we are looking forward to a very successful end to this 2021 school year, and starting the 21-22 school year, hopefully all in physical buildings, and ensuring that we are implementing the 2021 Student Achievement Plan that's been released by our Chancellor and our Mayor. So that's where we are at this time. So thank you for inviting me, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I know we have a few questions in Spanish that we weren't able to get to, and I apologize for that. We only have 1 more minute on the Zoom. Would it be possible for Tia, for Carla to just summarize what that is, or either of the interpreters, so that we know where those questions were headed?
Yes, hi, thank you. This is normally not how we do this. In fact, this is my very first time doing this, so bear with me for a sec. We normally have we normally have the Spanish interpreters on the line precisely to facilitate that. Hang on just a sec. And after, we haven't had any parent right now on the line. I just put a message on the chat. After the 2-hour mark, we're supposed to dismiss them. So if you guys have know anybody who speaks Spanish, just really encourage them to join in the line, because it just ensures that we have proper interpretation at all times. So I believe, let me see if I can scroll here. there are comments and there was one question. The question was,
I know I'm putting you on the spot. And if it's,
I can translate it if you need it.
let me see.
I'm trying to find it.
¿Dónde está el plan? Está disponible al público. Where is the plan? This is referring to what was previously asked in Spanish in regards to the students with disabilities. Where is the plan? Is it available for the public?
so I think Executive Superintendent Watts, or Superintendent Scott, you were talking about the plan.
So it is
Okay.
actually on the Department of Ed website. It was announced, it's a 6-point plan and it is on the Department of Ed website.
Wonderful, thank you. So on that note, it's 8:01, and I just want to again thank you all for joining us, for your insights, for your information, for your community. We appreciate you, and we will see you soon. Thank you. Good night. Happy Lunar New Year.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.